So let me start directly. So as you heard, this is co-authored work with Florian Berg, who is at MIT, and Zach Sautner, who is my colleague at Frankfurt School. I don't think that I have to convince the audience that there has been a massive rise in the importance of the ESG principles in the investment management industry. Actually, in 2020, $1 in $3 was being invested according to ESG principles of the total US assets under professional management. Now, what do we do when we would like to know the ESG quality of firms? These days, we very often rely on ESG ratings. And what we did in this paper, we actually looked at one of the major ESG ratings providers and found something very surprising. So let me tell you that there are also other vendors. So there is MSCI, Sustainalytics, S&P Global, Visual Iris, and Refinitiv ESG is highlighted because it is a provider of the ESG data about which I will be speaking for the next, let's say, 14 minutes. This rating provider was formerly known as SF4, so you might also have it in the memory. But let me tell you, before I tell you what we do in the paper, let me tell you how many papers have been written using these data. So we find around 1,500 papers that either use these data or consider this data, referencing this data important. So this is a very non-negligible number. And let me tell you a bit more about these ESG ratings before I tell you what happened to them and how it impacts what we do in our research and also investment practice. So I will be speaking about this one ESG ratings provider that has these ESG scores that go from 0 to 100. So 0 is the minimum and 100 is the maximum. And ESG scores are usually based on these three pillars. So there is the environmental pillar, social pillar, and the governance. And in this case, there were 186 metrics that were combined together to form one number. And what we find is that this one number for, let's say, firm year was changing, and not only once, but it has been changing in the past, and it is changing as we speak. Actually, tomorrow it's going to change as well. So we document large historical rewritings of the ESG ratings database or a data provider called Refinitiv ESG that many of our universities are subscribed to. So we download the same set of firm year observations. We always work with 2011 to 2017 because this was the universe that we downloaded in September 2018. And 2 years later, so September 2020, we download the same observations. And we observe that they're completely different, and we find that there is an explanation for that. However, we observe that this is not just a one-time thing, and Refinitiv ESG actually continues to adjust this data ex post in an unannounced way. So actually, I've been downloading the data every Tuesday, and every Tuesday I download the historical observations are slightly different. So that's why the name. Now, let me just, I think it's always easy to imagine, to first bring up one example firm. So we are looking now at the ESG ratings for a firm between 2011 and 2017, and you see the development that the firm was improving its rating compared to the, we should look at this trend. Now, the ESG rating that was downloaded now, not in September 2018, but 2 years later, in September 2020, is completely different. It's the same firm, and we see this change. Now we look at the entire sample, and we observe a drop of 21% on average and 18% median. Now, why did this happen? We find why this happened, and that is still not the punchline of the paper. There is much more coming, but we still need to bring it up because it relates to many of the results that we want to talk about. So in April 2020, basically Refinitiv ESG changed the methodology used to determine its ratings. So it changed two things: the treatment of Boolean metrics. So it awarded different scores if you were not commenting on some metric, and it introduced a proprietary materiality matrix and also magnitude matrix. So that was a change. So between our two downloads that I just showed you, in April 2020, there was a change in the methodology. We're still this is not still the punchline of the paper. We show that this has, you know, effects on all analyses that we run. I mean, unless you save the data, you know, regularly, it has effect on, because this is rewritten database. It has an effect on the classification of firms into quantiles that we commonly used in, you know, research and investment practice. And importantly, we also show that these tests that, you know, relate ratings to stock market returns look quite different. And I will get to that in a few moments. So let us have a look at the quantiles. So we call it quantile overlap analysis. So we look at, you know, which firms would be are the same according to old data and the new data, and which are different. So for instance, if we look at the top ESG decile, there the overlap is 70%. If you look at bottom ENS decile, there the overlap is just 50%. So ENS is, for those who don't work with it too much, it's a just environmental and social pillar averaged out. Now, let me now tell you that overall, you can say that, you know, 1 in 3 firms, for instance, that you would label as top 10% ESG firm would be different. I would say still a really big finding. But what is coming next is, I would say, the major punchline of our paper, that this was not a one-time thing. So it was not just because there was a methodology change and you know, maybe someone was not paying attention. So this rewriting happens on a weekly basis. So every Saturday, to the best of my knowledge. And here I'm just showing you the example from before. So this is the same firm, but now I'm adding a download in November 2020. So we have the blue line is September 2018, the teal line is September 2020, and now the red line is November 2020. So 2 months apart in 2020, you see a firm's ESG score halved. So you see, you know, the 2017 score, for instance, halved, and we don't find anything in the rep risk. We don't find any. We don't find why this is happening. So let me, in terms of, you know, that there was some scandal and it needed to be changed. So we show that this is not a one-time event, and the Refinitiv ESG continues to adjust the data exposed in an unannounced way. So let us think just for a moment, let me go back and let us think about the consequences. So this can have an effect on your, you know, classifications of quantiles for sure, and we also show it in the paper. But also if you're a portfolio manager, you can be maybe breaching your mandate, because let's say you have a mandate not to go below ESG score of 50. However, this firm's you know, score was halved. Also, the latest one was around 35, 36. And if so, you breach your mandate if you don't act on it, and it causes excessive churn rate potentially if you actually notice this and act on it, if you had some mandate for this. Now, another question that you might be asking, since when has this been going on? So we show that for sure, since the methodology changed, this has been happening on a weekly basis. However, we don't know since when this actually started, and we're still trying to answer this question. So we cannot say how many of the more than 1,500 papers used by Refinitiv ESG are impacted. And so the only thing we can say that we find evidence that this has been happening also prior to the methodology change that happened in April 2020. You might be now wondering, okay, so but why could this be happening? And we test multiple channels in our paper, but we have one particular channel in mind, and we call it the incentive channel. So let us think about the ESG ratings industry. So the whole industry follows an investor pay model, whereby the data vendors, you could argue that they might be competing on how useful these ratings are for the ESG related investment strategies. So you might when you survey the users of these data, you might hear that one of the key considerations can be how well these ESG scores or ratings do in predicting returns. So we have a look at this use. So we run a regression, seeing how well did the old scores predict the returns, and how well did the new and the rewritten ones do. And before I show you the result, let me also tell you that this is backed by evidence. So we find in a rate the raters, it's a survey that runs every year. We find supporting evidence that there is a wish for this financial linkage. So top three. So the third most common response was that the users of these ratings, so but asset managers, for instance, would like to see better linkage to company financial performance. So let me show you the result. So every year we take a look, we form a portfolio, and we take a look what it would perform if we held it for a year. And so this is a predictive regression. So the dependent variable is the future return. And we see that we have in the paper, we have an analysis also with ESG scores, but now I'm showing you the ENS scores, which is the average of environmental and social scores. And you can see that before the methodology change, so these are columns 1 and 4, there was no statistically significant relation, and in the column 1, not even economically meaningful relation between ratings and returns. And with the methodology change, so our first post-methodology change download is September 2020, this relation was introduced, and both economically significant, but also statistically. And we also argue that with the ongoing rewriting, because at some point we started to do quite frequent downloads. So with for instance, our March 2021 download shows that post methodology change with the ongoing rewriting, this relationship might be even reinforced. So you see that you would have 1.17 percentage points. You'd be better off if you were in top ENS quartile, according to September 2020 data, and even 1.3 something if you were forming this on March 2021 data. So we also find this, as it's not yet in the paper, but you observe this reinforcement actually also with March 2022 data. So we argue that our evidence suggests that the benefits of investing in ESG firms might have been introduced through this methodology change related data rewriting, and potentially even reinforced through the ongoing one. You might be wondering, where is this coming from? And we both analyzed the granular input variables, so the 186 ones that flow into this, and also the way the items are combined. What I want to show you that only over 6 weeks, 86% of historical ESG scores were actually rewritten, and even 6% of data items. So it's both coming like bottom up, but there is also the layer applied on this is being changed as well. So this is again in line with this, that this ongoing data rewriting is happening. So we argue that the granular data is not main driver, but the last thing I want to show you is that over time, these granular data points are changing quite a bit. So we observe over 2 downloads between November 2019 and February 2021 that 44% of carbon emissions, so scope 1, so pretty straightforward to measure, has been changed in a way that depending on when you download it, you would have 27% more gigatons CO2 in your spreadsheet. Now, so we argue that these small changes, even to granular data, translate to much bigger ones over longer time periods. The last thing I want to conclude with is that I hope that we brought back some attention to, let's have a look first at the data that we work with and double check if everything is, as we expected, that we don't have look-ahead bias. And, we argue that actually this comes down to the incentive channel to demonstrate, to the subscribers to these ratings that these ESG scores are useful for developing ESG-related investment strategies. So I would like to thank you for your attention, and thank you again for the prize.
Thank you, Kornelia. Next, we're going to have Dragan Tong discuss the paper. Dragan?
I'd like to also congratulate the authors for winning the best paper. It's well deserved. It's an excellent paper. I actually read it since its first circulation, so really enjoyed reading it. So my interpretation of this research question is whether ESG ratings really measure ESG quality, and it helps us to understand the manufacturing of ESG ratings. And they focus on Refinitiv, one of the major rating agencies in the ESG field, and they take snapshots, multiple of them, over a global sample for this fixed 7 years of data. And they find actually all these ratings change every time you look at them. Even though they are the same company at the same timestamp, it actually changed rating. And average rating actually drops, but more importantly, the rankings, the relative rankings also get reshuffled. And the one motivation for this is to create ex post kind of predict power for this ESG rating that can predict stock performance, and then hopefully these ratings will be used more by practitioners and also users, subscribers, right, for Refinitiv. And I think this is really great contribution for us to be more cautious when we use this rating, and it's quite a serious result that because we are talking about the ESG, and this can happen to the ESG data, right? So my first thought is probably it's understandable that they want to fix the data sometime when they see mistakes, right? We use say worst data a lot, and we know worst data actually also the stuff at worst. They also try to correct the mistake or add more new data to the CRISP and other data set. And I find indeed actually Refinitiv in their methodology, that's most recent one I just checked yesterday, but dated February 2021. I didn't see any more recent one, but they actually say that it's possible for them to change the data, but only in the recent 5 years. Okay, any data older than 5 years, they don't change. But actually, if you look at the result that Kornelia just showed us, right? Actually, they change, right? Even the old data, more older than 5 years, they change. So this is inconsistent with the Refinitiv claim. So overall, I definitely believe in the finding, and I actually don't have any criticism to the paper. I use this for my research and teaching, and this is actually an old slide from my lecture notes. That's from SF4 when they actually try to promote their own data set. You see that SF4 is called SF4 because they actually measure 4 dimensions, including economic. And here's a slide to try to convince people that SF4 data is useful in the case of Bear Stearns in 2008, right? When Bear Stearns collapsed, you can see that actually their ratings were lower than other banks like Goldman. But if you think about it, if this actually was created ex post, right, then it's very easy to create this pattern. So that's one thing, right, that we should be careful about when we use this kind of rating, that it can be actually, right, just like the backdating for stock options idea, right? So SF4 actually has been expanding their coverage. You can see from this slide is originally more for North American and European firms, but later also in for Asia and other emerging markets. They claim to have 9,000 companies, and here is again from the 2021 methodology. So a little bit background. Actually, SF4 started in Switzerland in 2003, and then later had quite a bit of ownership change. Was acquired by Thomson Reuters, and then spun off to Blackstone and the joint ventures, and then lastly it was acquired by London Stock Exchange. And actually, Hong Kong Stock Exchange once wanted to buy it as well, by the London Stock Exchange. So they also try to try to cover Chinese firms. So in 2018, they covered Chinese firms, and also 2021, because now there are many companies and many actually a lot of interest in Chinese investment. So that brought my interest to Chinese companies, right? This to look at really the ESG rating of from Refinitiv of Chinese companies, and this is the company actually very famous in China. Is actually #1 company in China, and also #1 in terms of all the drinking companies. You probably don't know is called Multi, right? If you come to China, they should treat you with this. This is the best drink we have. You can consider it as Chinese, like China's Lafite, right? And it's #1 market cap in Chinese Asia market, and also the biggest drinking company. But it's actually the bottom 10%, right? Ranked number 100 out of 110 companies in this sector of beverage companies. And also there are a bunch of zeros, like human rights. Actually, this company got 0, and innovation got 0, and the resource use and other like product responsibility, they're all zeros. And then you can see the 3 pillars, like environment, social, and governance, 16, 7, and 21. And the total score is 13. And I would like to know why this is 13. I don't know. I need to get the weights. I don't know the weights. And there are some old weights like 34% for environmental, 35.5% for social, etc. But actually, this doesn't work. So if I put in this weights, actually they don't get to 13. It's actually 14.3. So the weights probably are different for different sectors. But within this beverage sector, probably they are the same. So wine company, I cannot back out the weights, but I can use another one, right? This is called the Wuliangye. You can consider it's the old brand of China, right? Another major liquor company. They got 81 out of 100 ranking. Is still very low. Again, human rights is 0 and innovation 0. But we did those 2 companies. I can actually back out the weights. Like environmental counts 23.85%, and social actually is the biggest one, is 48.62%. And then I can fit these 2 ratings. So it seems easy. And then they actually like the other famous drinks, just like in France, right? In China, we also have others like this one. You can consider as Margot, right, of China. It's Fen wine. And if you put in this one, right, also you see a bunch of zeros, but human rights is a bit better. And you put in the weights and the scores. Actually, you did get 25. I thought, wow, bingo! I figured out the weights. But actually, if I apply to more, right, this is another drinking company you can consider as a Latour, and also 0 for human rights innovation, get some points. But the thing is, actually, if I put in the same weights, they don't get the 27 points of ESG score. It's actually 28. And the same thing for Mutang of China, right? Actually, it's called Yanghe, and is 35.6. So the previous one actually is score is higher. The actual weighted score is higher than the ESG score, but this one is lower. So it seems like now it's random. You probably don't know all these drinks, right? But you see all this 0 for innovation and human rights. And another one probably you know, right? Probably all this other liquor you don't know, but the Qingdao you probably know. And just for fun, right? Qingdao get 1 point for human rights, and still the ESG score don't add up for this one. So you may wonder who is #1, right? #1, you may consider drinking company, maybe Coca-Cola, right? It's indeed #1. But they actually, this Coca-Cola is not the US Coca-Cola, it's the Switzerland bottling company Coca-Cola. And also, I think they don't add up to this score of 90. And actually, the US Coca-Cola is number 12, right? And other companies, you may think for this food and drinking, so I checked Nestle, right? It's actually #1 among 369 tobacco and food companies. So my point is actually, so this company is also from Switzerland, right? And the SF4 originated from Switzerland. So the takeaway can be that, okay, Switzerland companies, they can do ESG pretty well. Or another takeaway is, right, there's a home bias, right? They just give a Swiss companies higher ESG score. You can also check others like Roche, is very super high ESG score. So now come to my comments. Actually, I don't really have a lot of critical comments, but first I wanted to also to share with you that the ESG ratings are really matter. They really are important. People care, investors care. We have the CF paper in 2019, to show that the mutual fund investors actually directed the capital to high ESG rating. Another similar study in the European Financial Management, and also another working paper to show the high net worth investors actually they also follow the ESG rating. And most recently, actually, MSCI downgraded the Russia ESG rating, the country's ESG rating twice, not once, right? Now to the lowest one. So definitely people care about the ESG ratings, and the findings actually are important. We have important implication. And my second is whether the revisions are justifiable. So first part is justifiable because they announced it, they changed the methodology. And here I'd like to see more examples and understand that before the announcement, before April 2020, what was the objective and the use case for Refinitiv for ESG, and whether actually there will be other possibilities of the adjustments. The rewriting was due to disclosure quality or familiarity, etc. And here, I really want to know is whether the revision or the writing lead to a better measure of ESG quality. Maybe that was their goal, right? There's some evidence in the paper to say the answer is no, because those changes are not related to say rep risk, and also a lot of little input change, but a lot of output change, and large firms get actually the increase. So like to really give a little bit more chance for more benign explanation that the rating agency actually really want to improve quality, and we can use say CDP data, which is more like a non-profit organization, right? And then we have stronger conclusion. So my third comment is whether anyone is hurt, right? So Refinitiv will try to make money, try to get more subscription. That's understandable, but whether anyone is hurt, whether like capital is allocated, and they will be lead to greenwashing, etc. And we can look at the cases that the Refinitiv rating are really important, like they are only rating or they are tiebreakers, and also whether any particular firms are affected more. So in my understanding, emerging markets maybe there will be more random adjustment or negative adjustments. So you have seen my case example of human rights innovation of Chinese companies, they got zeros, right? And lastly, I would like to just mention whether this is isolated case is not. So I look at KLD data, actually KLD data, we have this pattern that sister companies of KLD actually get higher ratings. So we have a working paper to show that to share with you that this is not the only example from Refinitiv. KLD had the similar concerns. So I'm sorry for running out of time. Just to summarize, I think this is really timely and important study, and is well deserved the Best Paper Award, and it's very meticulous and rigorous analysis, and the findings will be really useful for regulators. Actually, many regulators are actually looking into this issue. I know regulators in India and also European Union are thinking about ESG rating regulation. They want to increase transparency. So my suggestion will be maybe give the benign explanation a little bit more chance to defend the rating agency, and also more discussion about damage and consequence, and some cross-country analysis. So lastly, I think this market is still relatively young, right? I think we have not reached the steady state yet, and I encourage everyone to keep paying attention. So that's all. Thank you for having me again, and sorry for running over a little bit.
Okay, so I'm gonna, we have lots of questions in the Q&A. I'm just going to give you one to answer, Kornelia, just because we don't have a lot of time. Actually, you can respond to him, and then I'm going to ask you the question. So why don't you go ahead and respond to?
Oh, I would just like to say one big thank you, just so that we have time for Q&A. So thank you so much. Very, very useful comments. Thank you.
Okay, and then offline you can answer the questions I don't get to. So one question is for portfolio returns sorted on scores, how much do such results change for each rewriting of history for a fixed sample?
So I would like to say that we have compared the pre-methodology change and the post-methodology change, and there we really see large differences. I think in the pre-methodology change, we even found negative alpha, and there was afterwards not even economically or statistically significant with the post-methodology change. With the portfolio sorts later ones, if we depend how we cut them off, it depends, the magnitude depends on if we use, deciles, quartiles, and so on. But there are still changes because the overlap is not 100%. Yeah.
Okay. So we have a question I think is a great question. What are your recommendations for researchers using these data?
So these days, I would say, so at least what many people do is that they combine multiple ESG ratings providers, and so let's say Sustainalytics, MSCI, S&P Global, and so on, to arrive at a more, I would say, wisdom of the crowd kind of proxy for true ESG quality, even though it still remains open if this is a good proxy for ESG quality of firms at all. But on the other way is to use the raw scores that are less subject to change, still are changing, and to construct kind of an own ESG rating, and also considering the value system of the given person, right? Because these weights are also imposing some sort of value system that is kind of encoded into how we arrive at this one number. So that would be my advice.
Okay, thanks a lot, and thanks for a really great paper and great discussion,
Thank you.
Dragan.